The bargaining agreement nears a January 9 deadline. The sides remain far apart on key issues. What a revenue sharing system should look like and what should be considered revenue and how to account for expenses. Boy, they're going to go out of business over this revenue sharing thing. If they're not willing to drop it, the league is.
$700 million in losses. That figure isn't exaggerated, and it isn't speculative hype. It comes directly from internal WNBA financial projections. According to league estimates, the most recent collective bargaining agreement proposal put forward by the Players Union would result in more financial losses over the next 3 to 4 years than the league accumulated across its entire first 29 years combined. That scale of loss is unprecedented, especially at a moment when the league is finally approaching financial stability. What makes the situation especially alarming is the timing. A January 9th deadline is rapidly approaching, and rather than moving closer to compromise, the two sides appear to be drifting further apart. This is no longer a standard labor disagreement where numbers are negotiated within the same framework. The league and the union are operating with entirely different definitions of what fair compensation even means. From a league's perspective, sustainability is the priority. After decades of operating at a loss, the WNBA has only recently begun to see realistic signs of long-term viability. Revenue is growing, viewership is climbing, and for the first time, profitability is no longer theoretical. In contrast, the union's proposal assumes financial growth that the league argues simply does not exist yet and may not exist at the scale being claimed. The gap between these positions isn't just wide, it's philosophical. One side is trying to protect a fragile business that has survived largely on external support. The other is demanding compensation levels that would immediately outpace the league's actual earning power. When those two approaches collide, compromise becomes extremely difficult. What's most striking is that this standoff is happening at what should be a turning point. Instead of negotiating how to share future success, the conversation has shifted toward whether that success can survive at all. And with the deadline looming, the cost of getting this wrong could reshape the league's future for decades.
It would result in $700 million in losses over the course of the agreement. Such losses would jeopardize the league's financial health. No kidding. Be like putting a silver bullet in it. The sources said they would be more than the combined losses of the league and its teams in the first 29 years of existence.
The current situation places the league in an almost paradoxical position. For the first time in its history, the WNBA has genuine momentum. Caitlin Clark has become a cultural catalyst. Media attention is stronger than ever. Merchandise sales are surging. Attendance is rising across markets. And a new media rights deal could finally provide a steady, reliable revenue foundation. All of the underlying indicators are pointing in the right direction. The league is no longer asking whether growth is possible. It's happening in real time. Yet that momentum is now at risk of being derailed by a compensation structure that the league argues would make basic operations financially impossible. From a league's viewpoint, the irony is impossible to ignore. After decades of struggling for relevance and sustainability, the WNBA is finally positioned to support itself. And at that exact moment, the Players Union is demanding terms that would immediately plunge it back into dependency. This isn't framed as opposition to player pay. It's framed as a warning. If costs rise faster than revenue, the business collapses. No amount of popularity can overcome sustained financial losses at that scale. The concern isn't just short-term pain. It's long-term damage. Lost momentum is hard to recover. Media partners walk away. Investors hesitate. Fans lose trust. The league believes this is a defining moment. Either build a sustainable future together or risk destroying the first real chance the WNBA has ever had to thrive on its own.
Teams. Portland and Toronto will debut in 2026. Cleveland, Detroit, Philadelphia recently paid $250 million each to join the league between 2028 and 2030. The league considers expansion fees a transaction that generates zero net revenue, as well they should. New teams are out the expansion fee but earn a fractional share of the future league revenue, while pre-existing teams get a portion.
There's a fundamental question hovering over this negotiation that no one from the Players Union appears eager to answer. What is the long-term objective? For nearly 30 years, the WNBA has survived largely because NBA ownership groups were willing to absorb losses. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent not because the league was profitable, but because owners believed it might one day become so. That day, for the first time, appears to be within reach. The so-called Caitlin Clark effect has driven unprecedented ratings, national attention, and fan engagement. Attendance is climbing. Sponsorship interest is growing. A new media rights deal is approaching, one that could finally deliver meaningful, recurring revenue. This is the moment the league has been waiting for. But it is also a fragile moment. Profitability is possible only if costs remain aligned with actual earnings. According to league projections, adopting the union's proposal would immediately erase any chance of stability, generating roughly $700 million in losses over a 3 to 4 year span. From a league's perspective, that isn't aggressive bargaining, it's existential risk. A business that is just beginning to stand cannot absorb losses of that magnitude and survive. The frustration lies in timing. Had these demands come during a period of proven profitability, the conversation would look different. But asking for revenue sharing levels that assume financial success before it fully exists threatens to collapse the entire structure before it stabilizes. The league believes this is not a question of fairness, but of survival.
With other competitive leagues to this league. I'm sorry, they're being self-serving here. Oh, if we can run the WNBA out of business, guess what? The Unrivaled's really going to take off. I'm going to tell you, those players better get together away from the committee, and they better vote Breonna Stewart and Ephesia Collier the hell out of this. They better get them out of there.
The league's position on expansion fees is relatively straightforward and, from a business standpoint, difficult to dismiss. Yes, expansion fees represent real money entering the league, but that money does not create new, ongoing revenue streams. Instead, it reshuffles future earnings among a larger group of owners. When a new team joins the league, existing franchises immediately give up a fraction of their future revenue. Instead of dividing profits among 12 teams, they now divide them among 13. Later, that split becomes 15 instead of 14. While the league receives an upfront payment, it simultaneously dilutes every team's long-term earning share. At the same time, the expansion franchise that paid the fee gains access to future league revenue. Over time, that ownership stake offsets the initial payment. When both sides of the transaction are considered, expansion does not generate net new revenue. It redistributes ownership and future income. This is why most major sports leagues avoid building salary structures around expansion fees. The NFL, for example, has not expanded in over 2 decades. If compensation systems depended on expansion payments, they would collapse the moment expansion stopped. The WNBA argues that doing so would create a dangerous precedent. Expansion is finite. Once the league reaches its target size, that revenue source disappears entirely. Yet player salaries, once negotiated, do not shrink automatically when revenue declines. From a league's perspective, tying long-term compensation to short-term cash injections is economically reckless. It creates obligations without sustainable funding and exposes the league to severe financial risk once expansion slows or ends. This isn't about denying players their fair share, according to league leadership. It's about ensuring that the share being offered actually exists year after year, not just during a temporary growth phase.
The WNBA proposal from December 18th featured an uncapped revenue sharing component, a raise of a maximum salaries above $1.3 million and growing to nearly $2 million over the life of the deal. It's crazy. It's crazy. The average salary by the end of the deal would be $780,000 a year. They're making what, $120,000 on average now? The salary cap would be $5 million.
At the core of this financial standoff lies a single, deeply contentious issue: how revenue is defined. The Players' Union is demanding approximately 30% of gross league revenue, along with a proposed salary cap of around $10.5 million per team. On its face, that demand reflects a push for players to share more directly in the league's growth. The league, however, has categorically rejected the revenue projections used to justify those numbers. The disagreement becomes especially explosive when expansion fees enter the conversation. Between 2028 and 2030, new franchises in Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia are each expected to pay $250 million to join the WNBA. The Players' Union has included those expansion fees in its revenue calculations, arguing that they should be treated as part of the league's income pool, and therefore shared with players. This is where negotiations begin to unravel. From the league standpoint, expansion fees are not operational revenue. They are one-time payments made in exchange for future ownership stakes. Including them in revenue sharing would artificially inflate income figures and create compensation obligations that the league argues it cannot sustain. To the union, excluding expansion fees feels like withholding money that clearly exists. To the league, including them feels like building a salary structure on temporary cash injections that will not repeat once expansion ends. This fundamental disagreement isn't about percentages. It's about economic philosophy. Once expansion fees are counted as recurring revenue, every downstream number changes. Salary caps rise, guaranteed compensation increases, and long-term financial commitments lock into place. The league's concern is that once those obligations are set, there's no undoing them, even after expansion money disappears. That's why this single accounting decision has become the pressure point for the entire negotiation. Until both sides agree on what counts as real, sustainable revenue, no amount of compromise on percentages will bridge the gap.